The first plasma bolt struck the jagged ridge like a drunken firework, and Cale Arden ducked instinctively, swearing at the cloud of dust that coated his uniform. "Well, that's one way to wake up before breakfast," he muttered, wiping soot off his goggles. The human expeditionary force on Vera 9 was a mess of blinking lights, sparking consoles, and officers nervously checking their blasters as though that alone could keep the sky from raining death. Cale tried to keep track of the incoming reports, but his translator kept turning every alien call sign into something like Fluffy Snail Brigade, which, while amusing, was not helping him understand the tactical situation. From the corner of his eye, a streak of movement caught him, impossibly precise, impossibly smooth. The alien commander was already there on the ridge like she'd dropped straight from the sky. Cale blinked. Long ears curved gracefully from her head, catching faint signals of movement he couldn't even begin to process, and her uniform shimmered with a material that seemed to bend light around her. She raised one hand, and Cale saw entire squads pivot as if telepathically instructed. "I hate people like her," he muttered to the soldier next to him, who only grunted and tried to cover a leaking plasma conduit. "Lieutenant, are you observing or standing there criticizing the enemy?" the soldier asked. "I'm multitasking," Cale said, ducking again as another bolt zinged past his helmet. "One eye on the battlefield, one eye on sarcasm. Keeps morale up." The alien commander crouched behind a crystal outcrop, then leapt with the grace of someone who didn't think gravity applied to her. She landed perfectly among her troops, signaling, pointing, and murmuring commands that seemed to ripple through the ranks. Drones buzzed in formation above, weaving in and out, scanning, recalculating. Cale noticed a rogue mech careening toward her position, its servos whining in panic. Without hesitation, she flicked her wrist and the mech halted, tilted, and then backed off like it had reconsidered its life choices. Cale raised his eyebrows. "Okay, that was impressive," he muttered, "and terrifying, mostly terrifying." A communication chime interrupted him. It was a message from Captain Horan. "Observe her, learn, don't die," Cale sighed. "Well, that's encouraging. Nothing like a vague death warning to start your day." The alien commander's voice, smooth with subtle laughter, carried across the battlefield. "Human efficiency is adorable," she said, long ears tilting in a motion that made her expression almost playful. "Your panic is statistically predictable." Cale blinked. Did she just mock us from across the ridge and make it sound like a compliment? He ducked again as a volley of plasma arcs cracked against a nearby rock, showering sparks. "I think I'm in love with danger, or her." "Probably both." She signaled again, and Cale saw her forces perform a coordinated flanking maneuver that no human officer would ever consider without consulting 10 manuals and a psychic. The precision made his stomach twist with admiration and a hint of jealousy. One of his soldiers whispered, "Does she always move like that?" Cale leaned over. "No, normally they just explode." He gestured to a smashed drone, smoldering in a crater. "Consider this a rough draft of alien tactics." Cale tried to get closer to observe, ducking behind the remnants of a scorched hover tank. She noticed him immediately, long ears twitching, and gave a subtle wave. "Yes, you human," Cale whispered to himself. "Stop panicking and look like you're part of this war thing." He raised his visor, attempting to look competent. The commander barked an order, and Cale realized she wasn't just moving troops. She was reading them, adjusting their morale, predicting enemy positions before sensors even blinked. She moved among them with casual elegance, yet each motion carried authority, precision, and oddly, a kind of humor that made even the most terrified soldiers smirk despite themselves. Cale's radio buzzed. "Lieutenant, status." "I'm surviving," he said, "and possibly witnessing a miracle, also possibly dying in style." A sudden burst of plasma forced him to roll, landing next to a human soldier who had already fainted from stress. Cale offered a hand and the soldier groaned. "You see her, she's insane." "I see her," Cale admitted. She's magnificent, terrifying, and probably plotting my imminent demise for fun. And yet, he tilted his head. She made that mech stop like it had a conscience. How do you even do that? Above, a drone scanned the battlefield. The alien queen flicked her wrist again, and it zipped off to intercept another incoming projectile, exploding it midair with pinpoint accuracy. She glanced at Kale, long ears flicking, eyes narrowing ever so slightly. Then, without warning, she made a gesture toward him, half mocking, half inviting him to move with her, or perhaps to just keep up without dying. Kale grinned nervously. "All right, you magnificent lunatic, let's see what happens next." He scrambled to his feet, adjusting his gear and muttering about needing better shoes for alien parkour. The battlefield stretched before them, chaos and strategy interwoven like a dangerous dance, and Kale realized he had no idea whether he was witnessing the future of warfare or the universe's most elaborate joke. Yet as he followed her across the jagged terrain, he couldn't stop thinking. If she survived this, he might actually survive too, and somehow, improbably, fall for the alien queen with the long ears who commanded not just armies, but his very attention. Kale had never imagined that observing a battle could feel like attending a circus run by a galactic prodigy. He ducked behind a jagged chunk of obsidian, trying to look inconspicuous while the alien queen, long ears tilting like twin radar dishes, coordinated her forces with the ease of someone making breakfast. One second her drones were scanning enemy lines. The next, she was nudging a hovering artillery cannon to the left, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like, "Let's give them a challenge, but not too embarrassing." Kale squinted at the readings on his wrist console. Enemy units were approaching fast, yet somehow, in the chaos, the Queen's troops moved like synchronized dancers. "Okay," Kale muttered to the nearest human officer. "Either she's psychic, or our entire understanding of physics is wrong." The officer, crouched beside a blinking energy core, gave him a blank look. "Both, probably," he whispered, and Kale nodded solemnly. Suddenly, a plasma volley erupted near their position. Kale rolled, cursing gravity, bad footwear, and anyone who had ever suggested humans and aliens could fight side by side without incident. When he peeked over the rubble, he saw her standing casually, one hand on a floating control panel, the other gesturing like a maestro conducting chaos. Her long ears twitched in rhythm with the drone's signals, and Kale swore they were communicating in some code he didn't yet understand. "Yeah, she's definitely laughing at me right now," he muttered. She called out something in her alien tongue, and Kale's translator sputtered, "Please avoid running directly into death." He blinked. Well, at least the sarcasm transcends language. He scrambled to join her position, stepping over Sparks and the occasional unconscious soldier, muttering about needing more coffee and better reflexes. The alien queen flicked her wrist again. A squad of drones zipped past, each carrying tiny explosive charges that neatly dismantled incoming enemy drones midair. "Impressive," Kale said aloud, mostly to himself. "And terrifying, mostly terrifying." She glanced at him, ears tilting slightly, and he felt his stomach do something dangerous. The Queen's smile was subtle, like she had just noticed him struggling and decided it was amusing. Kale's radio crackled. "Lieutenant, report." Captain Horan's voice was tense, though Kale suspected he'd already stopped caring about protocol in favor of survival. "Sir, I'm still breathing," Kale replied. "Also, she's somehow managing to make a dozen death machines dance in midair. I don't even." The Queen's voice interrupted, smooth and teasing. "Your humans have spirit. It's almost endearing how often you stumble." Kale blinked. "She's mocking me from across the battlefield, and it still sounds polite." A sudden movement drew his attention, a rogue mech charging down a cratered hill. Kale panicked and dove toward the nearest cover, only to see her flick her wrist. The mech froze, twitched, and then rolled harmlessly into a crater, as though reconsidering its career choices. "Seriously," Kale muttered, brushing soot from his helmet, How is she not causing riots on her own planet just by existing? The Queen called out again, this time directing human and alien units to work in tandem, and Kale noticed how she included him in her gestures. She didn't give explicit orders, more like invitations. He stumbled forward, trying to follow her lead, tripping over a cable that sparked under his boots. "Well, at least I'm memorable," he said, scrambling upright. She tilted her head, long ears flicking, and Kale swore he caught a hint of amusement. Amid the chaos, Kale noticed she occasionally paused, staring at the holographic map projected from her wrist device. Tiny blips indicated lives, friends, soldiers she was responsible for. Her eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, Kale realized she carried a weight he couldn't begin to comprehend. Then, as if realizing someone might see her vulnerability, she barked a sharp command, and the battlefield erupted in orchestrated chaos again. Kale ducked behind another chunk of debris, muttering about needing a manual for alien leadership styles. A nearby human soldier whispered, "Do you think she sleeps?" Kale chuckled nervously. "I hope so. Otherwise, she's going to be running nightmares across 3 star systems before breakfast." A sudden alarm indicated an incoming orbital strike. Kale froze. She waved a hand, and a kinetic shield shimmered into existence, redirecting the blast harmlessly into the canyon wall. "How does she make it look so easy?" he asked. Her ears twitched in response, almost like she had heard him, and she muttered something that his translator translated poorly as, "Pay attention, human, or you'll decorate the ground with panic." Kale laughed despite himself. "Noted, ma'am," loud and clear. The battle raged on, yet in every maneuver, every calculated risk, Kale began to see more than skill. He saw personality, humor, subtle teasing embedded in tactical genius, and a mind that reveled in chaos while never losing track of human, or alien, lives. He realized he was learning from her not just strategy, but timing, patience, and a dangerous kind of confidence that made everything she did seem inevitable. Finally, during a brief lull, she glanced at him, long ears flicking in a motion that made his chest tighten. "Human," she said, voice carrying across the dust, "you're surprisingly resilient. Continue to survive." Kale straightened, brushing soot from his uniform and grinning. "Resilient? I'd call it stubborn, also lucky, mostly lucky." She inclined her head slightly, almost imperceptibly, and moved forward, leading her troops once more. Kale followed, falling into step beside her, trying to emulate competence and failing spectacularly. Yet he didn't mind. Amid explosions, plasma fire, and the improbable grace of the alien queen, Kale felt alive in a way he hadn't before, and oddly entertained. Survival was important, yes, but somehow, keeping up with her and surviving in style felt even more crucial. And for the first time, Kale admitted to himself that amid chaos, smoke, and dancing death machines, he was utterly captivated by the battlefield, by the war, and most dangerously, by the alien queen who seemed to laugh at both. The canyon shook as another wave of enemy drones barreled down the narrow pass, and Kale Arden barely managed to jump over a sparking conduit without screaming. "I swear, this planet was designed by sadistic architects," he muttered, clutching his wrist console like it was a life raft. The alien queen was already moving ahead, long ears flicking as she redirected her troops with gestures that made Kale feel like a toddler trying to follow a dance he could barely see. She spotted him lagging and called out, voice teasing yet commanding, "Human, stop thinking and start moving. You're making me question evolutionary priorities." Kale waved a hand in mock surrender. "Priority 1, stay alive. Priority 2, pretend I know what I'm doing." A plasma drone zipped overhead, then veered sharply to avoid a force field the queen had raised with a casual flick of her wrist. "Force fields," Kale muttered. "I hate that they exist and also love them." He rolled behind a rock that hummed under the blast, glancing at her. She was moving between squads as if gravity didn't exist, issuing commands in a language that sounded like music mixed with static. Her long ears twitched constantly, scanning, predicting, teasing the battlefield itself. "Sir," a soldier shouted, "they're trying to flank us from the left ridge." Kale pointed frantically at the Queen, who was already 5 meters past him, weaving between explosions, directing drones to intercept. "Yeah, she's aware, we're not." He ducked again, muttering, "I feel like a backup character in her personal action movie." The Queen glanced at him mid-stride. "Human, try to keep up, or I'll start adding comedic timing to your demise." Kale forced a grin, nearly tripping over a fallen mech limb. "Comedic timing already feels like my life's a sitcom." A sudden blast sent him skidding across the rubble, and he landed in a heap beside brow, or the alien equivalent, raised. "You're improving, slowly, but I appreciate enthusiasm even if it's misplaced." Kale scrambled up, muttering about alien sarcasm being more lethal than plasma fire. He followed her as she signaled a complex maneuver combining drone strikes, orbital sensors, and human infantry in a ballet of chaos. One of her drones zipped past, dropping a payload that exploded midair, scattering enemy units. Kale ducked instinctively, then peeked over the edge. "I'm starting to think she enjoys this way too much." The Queen laughed, a sound that cut through the cacophony, long ears twitching in delight. "War is tedious if you don't have fun," she called, launching herself onto a ledge with grace Kale could only envy. "Also," she added with a tilt of her head, "it helps morale when your allies think you're invincible." Kale wiped his visor and muttered, "She's right. I feel invincible in comparison, which is terrifying." A rogue drone swooped down, targeting him directly, and he ducked behind a hovering energy barricade, slapping it in panic. "Yep. Definitely terrifying." The Queen shot him a sideways glance, amusement sparkling in her eyes. "Human, if you're going to survive, please coordinate with physics occasionally." As they pressed forward, Kale noticed how her gestures were never hurried, even in chaos. She paused mid-maneuver, tilting her head, long ears flicking as she considered 100 possible outcomes in seconds. "She's a walking strategy simulator," Kale whispered to himself. "Except the simulator is way cooler, and it might laugh at me before killing me." An enemy ambush erupted from a side canyon, and Kale tumbled to cover behind a collapsed hover platform. "Okay, plan B. Survive and don't look like an idiot." The Queen was already there, orchestrating her troops like a conductor of a very dangerous orchestra. Drones zipped, soldiers pivoted, enemy mechs froze mid-charge. She glanced at Kale, one hand flicking in a precise command that made an enemy drone spin harmlessly into a crater. Her lips quirked. "Human, see? Physics can cooperate if you insist." Kale couldn't help laughing. "I insist." Mostly because it has no choice. He vaulted over a piece of debris, landing awkwardly beside her. "Also, I think I'm learning your secret. You scare death into submission, and I like it." The Queen's ears twitched, and she muttered something in her language that the translator rendered poorly as, "Flattery improves odds of survival." Amid the chaos, Kale realized he was beginning to understand her style. Calculated risks, small gestures, humor embedded in command. It wasn't just war, it was choreography. And somewhere in that rhythm she made him feel capable, not just a soldier scrambling to keep pace. His chest tightened slightly as she glanced at him, long ears brushing back in some subtle expression he couldn't name, but it made him grin despite the danger. An incoming missile streaked toward them, and the Queen flicked a hand lazily. It veered harmlessly into the canyon wall. Kale ducked anyway, muttering, note to self, she might enjoy comedy more than destruction. She caught his eye, smirked, and gestured for him to keep moving. He ran, adrenaline surging, laughter spilling out despite the chaos. By the time the skirmish ended, both sides battered and smoking, Kale collapsed beside her on a plateau. "You know," he panted, "if this war thing doesn't work out, you could probably have a career as a stunt coordinator, or a motivational speaker, or both." She tilted her head, ears flicking, and her laugh cut through the silence like sunlight. "Human, you survive and you insult me. Remarkable." Kale grinned. "What can I say? It's my charm, mostly accidental. She shook her head, still smiling, and gestured toward the horizon. "The battle continues," she said, voice teasing, but now perhaps with slightly less human panic. Kale followed, brushing soot off his uniform. Somehow, amid the plasma, chaos, and improbable maneuvering, he felt a strange warmth. Survival mattered, yes, but keeping pace with her, and sharing these impossible, dangerous, and absurd moments, felt like the only proper way to live in this war-torn galaxy. And somehow, impossibly, Kale realized that amid missiles, drones, and alien genius, he was starting to care less about staying alive, and more about keeping up with the alien queen who moved like the universe itself, had a sense of humor. The canyon walls seemed to close in as Kale Arden trudged behind the alien queen, her long ears swaying with every precise step. "You know," he muttered, trying to catch his breath, "at some point, someone should tell the canyon it's not supposed to be scary." She glanced over her shoulder, a subtle smile playing across her face. "It finds you entertaining," she said, voice calm but carrying that teasing edge Kale could never quite resist. Kale shook his head, muttering about human irrationality, alien sarcasm, and how he'd probably survive this day only to trip over a rock next. She didn't pause, instead tapping on her wrist console, sending drones to scout ahead. One of the drones buzzed toward him, hovering just long enough to display a holographic arrow pointing at the safest path. Kale blinked. "I'm not sure if that's helpful or humiliating," he muttered. The queen's ears twitched, which Kale interpreted as amusement. Suddenly, the enemy launched a concentrated strike from the ridge above. Kale dove for cover, rolling over a jagged rock and cursed gravity and bad decisions. The queen landed beside him, one hand flicking lazily, the other adjusting a floating control panel. A volley of plasma arcs zipped past, and her drones intercepted them with near-perfect timing. "I don't even," Kale began, only to be cut off by her quip. "Yes, human. Even chaos has an order if you watch closely. Try to keep up." Kale wiped soot from his goggles. "Keep up. I barely survived breakfast." She tilted her head, long ears flicking in a gesture Kale had learned over time meant, "You'll survive if you pay attention." He tried to emulate her composure, ducking behind debris while pretending he had a strategy, muttering, "Note to self. Panic is not a tactic unless it's entertaining." The enemy mech advanced and Kale froze. She's not going to." The queen flicked her wrist, and the mech skidded sideways, sparks flying, as if it had been nudged by an invisible hand. Kale raised an eyebrow. "I think I'm witnessing physics break etiquette," he whispered. She caught his glance, ears tilting, and said, "Physics obeys those who command it well. You, however, are negotiable." Kale rolled his eyes, muttering something about aliens enjoying their humor dangerously, and sprinted toward a downed hover vehicle, hoping it could provide cover. The queen moved beside him, effortlessly dodging energy blasts. "Are you always this reckless, human?" she asked, smirking. Kale shrugged. "Reckless? No, optimistically clumsy." She laughed softly, the sound carrying even over the crackle of plasma, and Kale felt something warm in his chest he refused to name. They reached a narrow ridge where the enemy had trapped both human and alien squads. Kale froze, staring at the sheer drop below, trying not to think about falling. She crouched beside him, tapping on a floating panel that instantly created a protective barrier. "Don't worry, human," she said. "It's only mildly lethal if you panic, mostly if you scream." Kale exhaled, noted. Minimal screaming, slightly improbable survival. As the ambush intensified, the queen's strategic genius became clearer. She moved like a conductor, her troops dancing to her silent rhythm. Kale tried to keep pace, throwing in his own flailing gestures to signal retreat or advance. At one point she glanced at him, ears flicking in amusement, and muttered something that the translator rendered as, "Your enthusiasm is charming, even if misguided." Kale grinned. "Charm is my fallback plan," he said, "mostly for situations exactly like this." A rogue plasma drone shot toward them. Kale ducked instinctively, but she calmly extended a hand, wrist flicking. The drone froze midair, spun, and then exploded harmlessly against the canyon wall. Kale stared. "Okay, yes, I'm officially useless next to you." She smirked, long ears twitching, and said, "Useful or not, you survive. That counts." The battle wore on, waves of enemies, plasma strikes, and drones converging like a storm. Kale began to understand her style, calm amidst chaos, humor woven into strategy, calculated risks that somehow always worked. He followed her every move, stepping into the rhythm she set, and slowly the fear he'd carried began to dissolve into exhilaration. "I think I might enjoy this," he muttered. "Mostly because I'm still alive and you're amused at my panic." A pause came as both sides regrouped. The queen crouched beside him, long ears angled forward, scanning the horizon. Kale took the chance to catch his breath. "You know," he said, "if anyone asked me yesterday where I'd be today, I would not have said dodging plasma fire beside a stunning alien queen who apparently makes physics take coffee breaks." She tilted her head, ears flicking, and replied, "Reality is rarely predictable, human, but you adapt surprisingly well." Kale smirked. "Adapt? I'd call it sheer dumb luck, and the occasional instinct to survive." She laughed softly, a melodic sound that cut through the tension. "Your luck is commendable," she said, "and your voice is amusing when you panic." Kale chuckled, brushing soot off his uniform. "I'm full of surprises, mostly for my enemies. Occasionally for myself." The enemy launched a final assault, and they moved together, a strange duo of human chaos and alien precision. Kale covered a flank she had momentarily missed, saving a squad of humans from certain doom. She shot him a look, long ears flicking in appreciation, and quipped, "See, even humans have moments of usefulness." Kale bowed dramatically, grinning despite the explosions. "I live to serve and occasionally amuse." As the dust settled, both sides battered and retreating, Kale and the queen paused on a ridge, breathing heavily, laughter spilling between them. "You know," Kale said, "somehow I survived, and I think I like surviving with you more than alone." She tilted her head, ears brushing against the sensors of her uniform, a faint smile on her lips. "Then you will continue to survive," she said, "and perhaps in time learn the pleasure of being slightly less panicked." Kale nodded, heart racing for reasons beyond the battle. Amid explosions, drones, and improbable maneuvers, he realized something dangerous. He wasn't just fascinated by her strategy, her grace, or even her long ears that twitched in amusement. He was beginning to care. And somehow, improbably, he was beginning to enjoy it. The battlefields of Vera 9 had gone quiet, at least for the moment. Kale Arden staggered over a ridge, brushing soot and alien dust off his uniform, and muttered, "I swear the canyon has learned to hold grudges." The alien queen, long ears twitching in the breeze, walked beside him, seemingly unconcerned by the scorched terrain. "Perhaps it simply dislikes humans," she said, a hint of amusement in her tone. Kale snorted. "I'd say that's fair. We tend to wander into bad ideas more than safe ones." Her gaze swept across the valley below, where soldiers, human and alien, were tending to the wounded and salvaging broken drones. Kale followed her eyes and realized that the chaos of war had given way to something calmer, something alive. Even amidst destruction, life persisted, humming quietly between the scars of combat. "You know," he said, "it's kind of nice seeing everyone survive, mostly because I didn't die spectacularly today." She raised an eyebrow. "Mostly?" Kale grinned. "Well, let's keep some room for improvement. Survival is a continuous art form." A nearby squad of humans waved awkwardly at them, offering weary salutes. Kale returned them with a mock bow. "I'd like to thank you for not being vaporized this morning," he said. The queen's lips quirked and she leaned slightly toward him. "Your humor improves morale," she said, "even if your timing is catastrophic." Kale chuckled. "I call it improvisational morale enhancement." As they walked toward the makeshift command center, the queen paused, turning to Kale with an expression that made his chest tighten. "Lieutenant Arden," she said, her voice smooth but carrying a gravity that made him stand still. "I have observed your performance. Your courage, your adaptability, and your ability to endure my sarcasm without immediately panicking. I find it commendable." Kale blinked. "You mean my charm, right? That's what you're really talking about." She tilted her head, long ears brushing against the sensors of her uniform. "Charm is negotiable," she said, "but you have earned something else." Kale swallowed, heart hammering, and tried not to trip over a loose power conduit. "Oh." "I'm intrigued, also terrified, possibly both." She gestured toward the horizon, where the twin suns of Vera 9 were setting, casting long shadows across the valley. "I offer you a choice," she said, voice calm, teasing, and utterly alien in its cadence. "Not as a political maneuver, not as a reward for loyalty, but as a personal choice recognizing what I see in you. I wish to marry you." Kale staggered slightly. "Wait, you marry me, like wedding-style vows, awkward dancing, cake?" She inclined her head. "Precisely, if you accept." Kale blinked, processing the impossible. All he could think of were the last weeks, falling behind her on impossible maneuvers, panicking through plasma fire, laughing through chaos, and somehow surviving alongside a genius who commanded armies as effortlessly as she teased him. "You're offering marriage to me. Not because I saved anyone, not because it's a treaty, but because I'm me." The Queen's ears twitched in what Kale interpreted as affirmation. "Exactly. Because of you, Lieutenant Arden. And because I believe you understand something about courage, humor, and survival that many do not." Kale laughed nervously. "Well, wow, I guess surviving the impossible does pay off eventually. And here I thought my skill set was limited to sarcasm and tripping over debris." The Queen's lips curved in a rare, small smile, the kind that made Kale's chest tighten in ways battle never had. "Your skills are uniquely human," she said, voice softening, "and they are enough." He took a deep breath, looking out over the valley, the soldiers still tending to the wounded, the drones humming softly, and the last plasma traces fading into the sunset. "Then I accept," he said, grinning. "Mostly because you're terrifyingly persuasive. Also because I've realized that the universe is better with you in it, and apparently me too." She inclined her head, ears flicking forward, and Kale could swear he saw the faintest sparkle in her eyes. The Queen extended a hand. Kale took it, marveling at the warmth, the strength, and the subtle grace of her grip. "You will find," she said lightly, "that marriage across star systems is complicated but rewarding." Kale nodded. "Complicated, yes. Rewarding, definitely. Also slightly terrifying. But I'm already qualified in terrifying things, thanks to you." She laughed, a sound that carried over the valley, melodic and teasing, and Kale felt the last remnants of tension dissolve into something utterly unexpected: joy. They walked side by side toward the rising command platform, soldiers turning to watch, drones buzzing in soft patterns overhead. Kale realized that he had changed. Where once he had panicked, he now moved with purpose. Where once he had feared chaos, he now found laughter and strategy intertwined. And where once he had thought survival was enough, he now understood that connection, trust, and unexpected love were the true victories. The Queen tilted her head, long ears brushing her shoulders, and said, "Shall we tell them, human? Or do you wish to savor your bewilderment a little longer?" Kale smirked. "Let's savor it. A moment for disbelief, then I'll march confidently into the galaxy as your fiancé." She nodded, ears flicking in approval. "Fiancé, yes, that suits us." And as the twin suns set completely, painting the battlefield in gold and crimson, Kale realized that the frontier was no longer just a place of survival, chaos, and plasma fire. It was a place where unexpected bonds formed, where laughter and courage could coexist, and where the alien queen who had conquered the battlefield and his heart walked beside him, long ears flicking, teasing, and utterly extraordinary. Kale Arden smiled. The universe was vast, dangerous, and utterly unpredictable, and somehow